Now, as far as something to say for a few minutes for the private group, I'm open to any subject, but one of the things that occurs to me is I will certainly let everybody know that you do fasting coaching over Skype, right?
Sure.
If somebody wanted to, aside from doing that or before doing that, try to do a little bit of short fasting, would that be good preparation or not? I mean, what kind of preparation would you think?
We can talk about that if you like.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. There are pros and cons. The pro is that the more you fast, the easier it gets. And so it does make it a little bit easier for people who have a little bit of practice already fasting. The body gets accustomed to fasting.
Okay.
And it's very easy. I mean, for me, it's like super easy. Now, most people think that fasting is painful, and they think that because that's often their experience when they fast, especially if they don't do it correctly.
Right.
The fact is that fasting is not painful or difficult. What's painful and difficult sometimes is detoxification. So it depends how toxic the body is. If there's a lot of toxins in the body, it can be pretty uncomfortable sometimes. On the other hand, the results are an amazing level of health and vitality. I actually guarantee people in writing, if they take my coaching, they're going to achieve the highest level of health and vitality they've achieved in decades, and in some cases ever. And this is I don't care what people eat. I don't care what they do. I'll offer that to anybody. If they're willing to follow my coaching, it's amazing what happens every time. But so there's the benefit of getting some practice. Now, the negative side of that is that, as I said earlier, it takes 10 or 11 days to get fully into the deepest part of the process. And while it's counterintuitive, the fact is that when we begin fasting, as I said earlier, the body goes through a series of different stages. Okay, in the first stage of the process, we are still looking at the digestive tract. That's 8 to 12 hours. The second stage, also 8 to 12 hours, the body is going to the liver for glycogen reserves. The body converts glycogen to glucose. It's always looking for sugar because sugar is the fuel we typically run on, right?
Yeah.
So we typically, in about 8 to 12 hours, we're going to run out of liver glycogen. So we're now 16 to 24 hours into the process, and the body has no more sugar. What does it do? It actually begins converting muscle into sugar. It's a chemical conversion process. It's called gluconeogenesis, which it means new sugar production. And the body's pretty smart. So how long it does this depends on body composition. For the average person, after about 2.5 more days, the body says, hang on, I don't want to lose any more muscle. Let's start to convert over to fat. Now, people say, well, this makes no sense. We store fat so that we have fuel for times where there's no food. Why wouldn't the body go right to fat? And the answer, I think, is because we are set up to run on sugar. Sugar is our normal fuel. Now, you've decided, let's say, Richard, you've decided you're going to come spend a month with me, and you're going to fast 21 days, and then there's going to be a week of refeeding. Your body doesn't know that. Your body only knows, hang on, it's been 27 hours and there's no fuel coming in yet. Okay, we'll use a little bit more, a tiny amount of muscle. It's a tiny amount. It's like you're going to see your bicep shrink. It's a tiny amount of muscle that's converted to sugar. And the body keeps thinking, rather than switching over to a whole different fuel system, let's go ahead and take just a tiny amount of muscle and make some sugar with that. Now, eventually it gets to the point that says, all right, I don't know what's going on here, but there's no food coming. It's been now 48 or 60 hours. Let's start switching over to fat because I don't want to lose all the muscle. So let's start switching over to fat, and that's what will happen. And if you had a bodybuilder with giant muscles, it would stay in this process of using muscle a little longer. In fact, his body would probably be happy to get rid of some of that excess muscle because it's metabolically expensive. And there's no point.
Less of that happens if you're lying in bed during this time, right, than if you're active.
Yes, that's right. That's absolutely right. And it's another good point because, again, this is a little bit counterintuitive for some. Some people think, well, I'm going to exercise so I don't lose as much muscle. By building up. But what happens is we ramp up the body's caloric needs, and so the body is using muscle for fuel. We're actually going to lose more muscle that way.
Okay.
Right?
Is that true when you're cleaner too?
Yes, but your body's much more efficient. So you need less to meet the same needs. I mean, the average American male now consumes some ridiculous amount, like 3,700 calories a day.
Yeah.
Okay, which is just about 3 times what I consume on an average day. Now, I there's no question I'm smaller than the average American male. I'm 150 pounds. The average American male is probably more like 185 pounds or 190 pounds. So they're going to have higher demands. But as the body becomes cleaner, it becomes more efficient. And we simply need less fuel to meet the same needs.
So the 48-hour figure, whatever you said, for switching from muscle sugar over to fat,
right?
Is that pretty much about the time that it changes for most people once they start?
Well, that's 48 hours of muscle consumption. So from the beginning, from your last meal, the average person somewhere on about 3 to 3.5 days in, their body starts to switch over to fat. It starts to ramp up fat consumption and ramp down muscle consumption. By the time we're about 10 days into the process, the body's consuming exclusively fat, with the exception, there is an exception, I say almost exclusively fat, and that's because your brain and a couple of other organs need to have sugar.
Yeah.
And we're not really getting any sugar from fat. So tiny amounts. So basically the body is going to continue to convert a tiny amount of muscle, and people will lose some muscle while fasting. But there's nothing to worry about, because by the end of the process, if done correctly, the body is so much more efficient that we rebuild lost muscle mass for most people relatively easily.
Okay. So it sounds like what you're saying is that, yeah, you can get used to the mentality of fasting by doing short fasts in preparation, but you can't do it long enough on your own for most people to really get into the healing part.
Well, that's right. And here's the thing. In fact, again, a quick story. About 5-6 years ago, I got an email from a young woman in Tel Aviv, Israel. And she said, Loren, I'm dealing with this condition. I've heard all about you. I'd like to come. I don't have the money right now. I'm a student. I'm going to try to get it together. I'm hoping to come in the next year. And long story short, she never did come. She wrote to me about once a year or so. And, I'm still working on making it happen. I want to make it happen. She would ask me questions. I was answering her questions. She asked me, what do you think about doing a series of short fasts? I mean, instead of fasting for 21 days, could I use 7 3-day fasts or 3 7-day fasts? No, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. Unfortunately, every time we fast, we start over again. We go back to the beginning. We go through the same stages, the same steps. And that means we're consuming some muscle. I said I wouldn't recommend doing a series of short fasts for that reason. So about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I got another message from her, and she said, I know you told me that it's probably better not to do a bunch of short fasts, but it's all I could do on my own. And so I did it anyway. And I was fasting every month for 4 days, something like that. She said, I lost all my muscle.
Wow. Wow.
What was happening was she was fasting and consuming muscle, and then she wasn't effectively rebuilding it before she fasted again and lost more muscle, and then the same thing kept happening. And so
she could have at least stayed where she was if she did the muscle building in between, right?
That's right. I mean, if she had more effectively rebuilt muscle, or maybe had a longer break between fasts, she wouldn't have had to lose, but she wound up losing quite a bit. And so just a word of warning for anyone that's thinking, I'll just do this on my own. I'll do a bunch of short fasts. I mean, you never get to the point where you're really doing the deep cleansing and you're losing muscle. And this is why I do think there's a place for short fasts, and I'll give you an example. I mentioned earlier we have 6 cats here. Yeah. We have 3 adults. We have 3. They're not. I don't know if they're still kittens. They're now 7 months old, but they're bigger than one of the 4-year-old cats. Yeah. But anyway, the first 2 cats that were here were both around 6-7 months old. And a vet said, it's time, if you want to have them neutered, this would be the time to do it. You don't want to wait too much longer. And so I had a vet come up here. They make house calls for like $25. And a lot easier than driving 2 cats down the mountain, 12 miles in cages they don't want to be in. So I had them come up here and perform this minor outpatient surgery. Yeah. And the cats are knocked out to do this, which is a terrible thing. And it's very difficult for the body to overcome the effect of general anesthesia, but that's what they insist on doing. Yeah. And one of the cats woke up and was perfectly fine. The other cat never was really okay. And so about 5 days later, I said to the vet, I called the vet and said, Diablo, this black cat, has a problem. He's not okay. I think something went wrong. I need you to come back up here as soon as you can. He came up the next day and he said, yeah, I think he's got an infection in his groin. Yeah. Something happened. Yeah. He needs powerful antibiotics or this could kill him. Right. And so I held this cat, and this cat came to me when he was 4 weeks old. He was a little tiny thing. He slept on my pillow every night for the first 2 months, right next to my face. He tried to follow me everywhere, but he couldn't keep up with me. I would actually pick him up, put him in my shorts pocket with his head sticking out, and I'd take him with me everywhere I went. Right. He was my best buddy. Yeah. And we played kind of rough, but he never tried to hurt me. Yeah. So I'm holding him, and I've got his head in my right hand while he's getting a shot in the groin, and it must have been incredibly painful because he bit down on my little finger so hard I had 5 deep puncture wounds. Wow. So the vet is standing there, and he says, you're going to need antibiotics. And I said, I'm not going to get antibiotics. Yeah. I'm going to fast. And he kind of rolled his eyes. And the next day, that was in the morning. Now, on Wednesday evenings when we're open, we show a movie to our guests. Yeah. And I had this it's a big flat screen TV that's mounted on a metal post, which is bolted to a big wooden cart, which I didn't want the thing to ever tip over. We sometimes have little minor earthquakes, etc. So the bottom of this thing is filled with concrete. It's heavy. In fact, I had a technician here completely rebuilding our network this morning. You've been here for the last 3 days. He just left an hour ago, 2 hours ago. I said, pick this, try to pick this end of the thing up. He couldn't lift it. Yeah. I lifted because I have to actually carry it over a little step to get it out to the common area. Okay. I do this every week, but he couldn't move this thing. So I have to push the cart out that afternoon, and just touching anything with this part of my hand was incredibly painful. The next day I had to go to the bank and run some errands in town. I didn't have a car at the time. I just had a quadricycle. It's got a handlebar like a motorcycle. Yeah, right? like an ATV. It's an ATV, and it vibrates, and I'm in pain because I've got to use my right hand on this thing. And I'm in town. I run into the veterinarian. He sees this my pinky by the end of the day, the first day, it was bigger than my thumb. Yeah. Okay. And he sees this thing and he says, "You need antibiotics." I said, "I'm not taking antibiotics." Yeah. By the way, I'll take antibiotics if I believe that I'm going to die from an infection if I don't take them. Right. Otherwise, that makes sense. Right. Otherwise, I have taken no drugs. There's an exception to ibuprofen. I fell 10 feet onto concrete and broke my hip. And 4 nights with no sleep. The 5th night, I thought, I need to sleep. So I took one. I got x-rays. My staff insisted I get x-rayed because we were afraid I'd broken my back. I was in sleep pain. Could barely move. So the doctor sent me out with sleeping pills, which I immediately threw away. Yeah. And I'm never going to take those. No one should ever take those. Right. And ibuprofen, which are pretty bad. But I thought, just in case, on the 5th night I took one, and it relaxed me enough to sleep. On the 6th night I took one, and it relaxed me enough to sleep, and then I threw the rest away. And those are the only drugs that I've taken in 33 years. Yeah, because you understand drugs. Exactly. They're always toxic. They only suppress symptoms. They prevent your body from healing properly. Yeah. No, thank you. I'll deal with pain. Right. There's techniques. There are chronic pain sufferers that drugs don't help very much, and I use those techniques if I need to. Yeah. But I guess I also have a high pain threshold. In any case, I was fasting. After it happened, it was the morning before. I'd eaten nothing. I saw him in the afternoon of the 2nd day. I'd eaten nothing. Yeah. Yeah. By the evening of the 3rd day, the swelling and pain were completely gone. And the wounds, you could still see the 5 puncture wounds, but they were pretty much healed already in 3 days. Now, it was interesting because that afternoon, I happened to be, so my staff, the last shift, gets off, the housekeeping staff gets off at 7 o'clock. We've got housekeepers here from 7 in the morning until 7 in the evening. And I happen to be out front of the building at 7 p.m. when our contractor, who we don't use him anymore, but he had done a lot of the original renovation work here for me.
Yeah.
When I got here, we had 5 guest rooms, 5 guest beds. We now have 44. But we've done a lot of work. And he had met, one of my housekeepers was a widow. His wife had just kicked him out of the house. They met while working here. They've been living together now for 6 years.
Okay.
And he was picking, every time she was getting off work at 7 o'clock, she lives maybe a mile and a half from here. She could easily walk, but didn't want to walk home at night in the dark.
Yeah.
So he would come and pick her up in his little pickup truck. And I happened to be standing out front when he pulled up to pick her up because she was just about to get off work. And he said to me, Carmen told me what happened to you. He said, the exact same thing happened to me last year. I was holding a cat while I was getting a shot. It bit my finger. I got a bunch of deep puncture wounds.
Wow.
He said, I took antibiotics. Now, he's a contractor.
Yeah.
He said, I took the antibiotics. It was 3 months before I could use my hand.
Yeah.
3 months taking the drugs. Mine was healed in 3 days, no pain. 3 days, I'm doing push-ups again, using my hand for everything.
Yeah, cat bites are really famous for causing infections like that.
The cat saliva is not very clean.
Yeah.
But this is the power of fast. And of course, it's not just fasting. To be absolutely fair, the contractor eats everything, drinks alcohol, smokes cigarettes, and took these toxic drugs. Yeah. But, that's the difference. A clean system with fasting can heal really. And I've had a lot of experience where the healing's been really, really super fast. It's amazing what happens.
So the short fasts have applications, especially if your system is in pretty good shape.
Exactly. There are times where it makes sense. If you wake up and you have a fever or a cold or a flu, that's your body detoxifying. So
let it use the energy for that. Right.
My advice is call in sick, stay in bed, sip water. It might be 1, 2, 3 days. Maybe that's all you need. That makes perfect sense because your body's calling for it.
Yeah. I have to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
People ask about pets all the time, generally carnivore pets.
Right.
And, like somebody asked me, dogs, for example, when they get about 10 or 12 years old, a lot of times get these fatty tumors on joints, like around the feet and stuff like that.
Right.
They're not so easy to fast, and usually you feel bad about withholding food from an animal that's not normally fasting.
Right.
And you don't want to, if you understand drugs like you were talking about, you don't want to poison them.
No, exactly.
So what kind of things do you do when that happens?
Well, to be honest with you, I've been super fortunate because we haven't had issues. I don't have dogs. I like dogs. I prefer your dog to my dog, though.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah, and cats are a lot easier. They're clean, they're quieter. This is a fasting center.
Right.
I don't want barking, etc.
So if a cat got a fatty tumor on the ankle, what are you going to do?
I don't know. I haven't had to cross that bridge yet. We have had some issues. We've had some issues, and so far, none of the kittens have done this yet, but all 3 of the adult cats. So I've got 2 cats that are now 7 years old, roughly, and one who turns 4 in about a month or so. Yeah. And 4 or 5. Maybe it's 5. I think it's 5, actually. All 3 of the adults have fasted on their own. One of them once and 2 of them twice.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's because they're at a fasting center they feel comfortable enough. No, but the fact is, and this is what every species will do when it's sick enough or badly enough injured. The problem is, it's the same problem for people. Okay, there's a school of thought. I talked about natural hygiene during the other broadcast.
Right.
There's a school of thought called nature cure. And there's a lot of similarities, but there's one significant difference. They teach that you should only ever fast. Like, fasting's powerful, but only when the body's calling for it. So again, if you have a fever, there's typically no appetite, right? You don't want to eat. That's when you fast, when your body says don't eat. And
I see. Okay.
And they're right that you should fast then, but they're wrong when they say you should only fast then.
Well, right, because the body's craving is not its natural inclination.
Exactly. The problem is, see, in an acute crisis of any kind, we will typically lose our appetite. And when we were kids, we get sick, we wouldn't want to eat. Chances are good that your mother did the same thing to you my mother did to me. She said, you have to eat to keep up
your strength up, right?
Exactly. This is the belief. They meant well. They were wrong. They didn't know any better. The body knew better than they did. But we were probably forced to eat when we shouldn't have.
Yeah.
That'll happen in almost any acute crisis. The problem is, most of the people listening today right now are probably not between the ages of 1 and 10. They're probably adults.
Yeah.
And adults are typically not dealing with acute crises. They're typically dealing with chronic conditions that they've created by eating poorly and taking drugs.
Yeah.
These are the things that actually cause chronic conditions.
Right.
Okay, the drugs themselves, you take the drugs for whatever it is, and every time you do that, you're preventing your body from detoxifying.
Yeah.
And you keep becoming more toxic and more dehydrated until you've created heart disease and diabetes and these conditions. This is how they get caused by the choices we make. So in a chronic condition, there will be no realization for the body to fast. The body won't lose its appetite. You'll keep on. It doesn't work that way. That doesn't mean fasting's not successful. Right. Almost every single person we've ever fasted. My clients are typically, on average, are planning their trip to us 3 or 4 months in advance. They're not coming to with an acute crisis. They're coming to with a chronic condition. If there's a condition, some people are coming healthy that just want to get healthier. It works for everybody. But people are often coming to us because they've got hypertension or diabetes or lower GI tract problems or Lyme disease or whatever it is. These are chronic conditions. There's no loss of appetite in those situations, and yet we see unbelievable rates of heat. It works almost virtually every single person gets healthier. Sometimes the condition doesn't resolve completely depending on what it is, but everyone gets healthier. Fasting is always beneficial, even when there isn't an acute crisis. The body won't call for it. Okay,
well, part of the reason the body doesn't call for it, it's gotten out of touch with actual hunger, and what it's trying to maintain is an addiction to stimulant.
That's right.
To avoid concentrating on what doesn't feel good.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what addictions are. And people are addicted to many things, not just cigarettes and alcohol, coffee, which was my first and only addiction in this life so far that I'm aware of, but also bread and cheese and protein. Yeah. These things, in fact, according to one study a few years ago, cheese is more addictive than heroin.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's mammals produce milk for their infant young. And it's in the interest of the species for the infant young to really enjoy that experience of drinking milk.
That's true. It's very satisfying.
And so, and the reason for that is because there's endorphins. We drink milk and we feel good. So when you take milk and make cheese, which is the process of concentrating it,
it's even more concentrated.
Those chemicals are more concentrated. They're so concentrated that if you start eating cheese, it's
well, you know that most of the 99+% of the people drinking milk or eating cheese, it's not actually even that. It's chemicals, and it's totally dead. Not identical to if it was alive and organic.
No question about it. No, there's no question about that.
Because I've been, as I told you, it's nice of you to even not excommunicate me because most of the raw vegan people think I'm really evil because in my particular case, I had to use raw milk to become stable and strong and healthy. And I never had, except for the initial adaptation period, that all the symptoms of, what do they call it, lactose intolerance disappeared. But I would never touch milk that is from animals that are abused or chemicalized or
that's been pasteurized.
Or that, I think that's really deadly stuff.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. You're absolutely right about that. And I think, first of all, just to clarify a couple things, you said you had to drink raw milk.
Well, it was just the solution I found. Maybe there
exactly. Yeah, that's the only mean, and listen, I understand you found a solution that worked for you. You know, of course, you're going to think this.
It's worked for decades, and I haven't
right.
been sick for many decades.
That's right.
Because I don't need to. But
I believe there's a better way that doesn't require animals, etc. But I understand where you're coming from.
I'm totally open to it.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify one more thing.
Yeah.
You said something about me not excommunicating you, where other most raw vegans think you're an evil person.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify. I don't necessarily think you're not an evil person. I'm just willing to talk to evil people.
Oh, good. That makes me feel better.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah. I feel like probably the ideal diet is a little bit of ripe organic fruit once in a while, and that's probably it. And
I agree. Yeah.
If you got cleaner and cleaner, that frequency of eating would get less and less, I think.
Well,
it's just a theory.
Yes, I don't know. I mean, this is basically the idea. I mean, there's the breatharians who think that we reach our highest level of functioning and consciousness when we don't eat at all. We get everything we need from sunlight and and prana.
The thing is, that's philosophical speculation. Unless somebody achieves it, you have no idea.
Well, and it's interesting because there are people out there. There's a woman, Australian woman named Jazz Maheen, who's been teaching this, traveling the world, teaching for years.
Yeah.
But people are smart enough to do some research, and what they find out is that she orders vegetarian meals on the planes.
Yeah, exactly.
She doesn't
have to. See.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, exactly. Right. So
she's just doing it to seem normal with everybody else.
There was an American. What was his name? Wally. Somebody. I can't think of his last name. Wally Brooks. Wally Brooks was an American who claimed to be breatharian, and one day was caught walking out of McDonald's with a bag of Big Macs.
But it was for somebody else, though.
No, he didn't say that. He actually said, he admitted that they were for him, and he said, but this is different. And it occurs to me, they're not food, so I guess you can eat them.
Yeah, well, you could still be a breatharian if they're not food.
They're not food, so he's still never eaten any food if he's only eating McDonald's. There was another guy. There was a guy, Richard. What was his name? He was a professional football player, soccer player from the UK, who had some crazy names he went by. He didn't use his real name. I can't remember what he called himself, but he had a couple names he kept changing back and forth. And he was claiming to be breatharian and charging people money to teach them how. And about 2 years ago, he came out on Facebook and said, I apologize, never mind, it's all bullshit. I mean, most of these people who claim, there's another guy who's out there right now, claims to be a celibate breatharian. He has 2 women that I know have claimed that he has sexually harassed them.
Is he the one in South America?
Tried to hit on them. I don't know where he is now. For a while, he was in Spain. He was stayed for 6 months at a friend's place in the Canary Islands, and she admitted to me that he eats regularly, and he claims to. He doesn't. If you ask him directly, I'm not sure what he would say. I've never met him personally.
Yeah.
But he talks as if he never eats anything.
Exactly.
And he's teaching breatharianism. That's simply
well, maybe he never eats anything during the classes.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. But anyway, so you're right. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's possible. There's an Indian man who is now in his 70s.
Yeah, that guy's legitimate.
They claim that he's been, that's legit. Now, if you've seen pictures of him or video, his arms and legs look like toothpicks.
He doesn't look like a bodybuilder.
Not exactly. He looks like he's made of little, toothpicks.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I love being alive, but I love body surfing and sex and, and riding bikes and rock climbing and hiking.
He looks really frail.
Incredibly frail. If that's what you have to.
Yeah,
that's how you become.
Not a good commercial for it.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he's the only one I've seen that.
Yeah, the other is just unknown speculation.
Exactly. I've always said, by the way, if I wake up one day and I'm not hungry and I never become hungry again, then I'll stop eating.
Then that's fine.
But if my body wants food, why would I deny it?
Yeah. And a big part of this whole thing is developing accurate communication with your body, I think.
Exactly. Which I believe anyone can do, but we have to get the body cleaned out of all the garbage. We have to get it hydrated when we're just not getting the signals properly.
Otherwise it's going to ask for its drugs.
Exactly. I mean, if you're addicted to anything, you're going to crave those things you're addicted to. And it's interesting. In fact, even on a much more general basis, we were talking earlier about hunger, right? So people tell me, I mean, this is something I hear. I heard this recently from a woman who is probably 50 or 60 pounds overweight. And on the second or third day of her fast with me, just a month or so ago, she said to me, "I'm hungry." And I said to her, with all due respect, I don't think so. I don't think so. Your body wants to cleanse and heal itself. When you give it the chance, it's not going to be asking for food. When it's literally got 2 to 3 months worth of reserves, why would it ask for food when it doesn't need it? It's not going to do that. So here's the crazy thing. For years, we've all grown up believing that when my stomach rumbles, or if it feels empty, or I feel weak, or I feel dizzy, or I feel tired, or I feel hangry, right? These are all symptoms that I need to eat.
Right, exactly.
These are all signals that I need to eat because I'm getting hunger. I'm feeling hunger.
Yeah.
Hunger, that's not hunger.
It sounds like contraction. That's being misunderstood.
This is the body cleansing or healing the stomach and digestive tract.
Right.
And here's the irony. And I'll tell you how I know this in a minute, but here's the irony. If that person's body, if the stomach could actually speak English to the person, it would say, Richard, your stomach would say, Richard, please don't eat anything. I'm trying to cleanse or heal.
Exactly. This is just the sensation we're going through.
And we get the sensation and we think, oh, I'm hungry, and we eat. And I understand why we believe it's hunger, because as soon as you eat, and your body now...
You feel better.
Well, your body now has basically, it's only got 3 options, really. It can eject the food, A and B, up or down.
Yeah.
And C, it can do the work of processing the food. Okay.
Right.
Now, it's not going to eject the food up or down. You've chosen to eat. It's not going to eject it unless it's really bad. Like if it's, obviously if it's rotten or something, your body says, okay, let's get rid of this.
Yeah.
Okay. But otherwise, you eat it, your body says, okay, you're the boss. You want me to eat this? I'll do the work of processing it. If your stomach is digesting food, it's no longer cleansing or healing. It ceases to do the work it was doing.
So the discomfort goes away.
The discomfort goes away. Exactly. And now how do I know that? Well, so in the 29 years that I got my body clean, I've been maintaining this, what I believe is an optimal diet. Yeah. I never, ever experience any of the symptoms that people call hunger unless I eat something that's not in my own program.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So if you never get hungry, how come, what makes you eat?
No, I do get hungry. I just don't have the stomach-based false hunger symptoms.
Oh,
that's not hunger.
Okay, so it's a different kind of hunger.
Exactly. Hunger is actually a pleasant, tickling sensation in the back of the throat. It's very similar to thirst. We talked earlier about dehydration.
Yeah.
If imagine. So have you been camping? I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you're camping in the wilderness. You don't have any water. What are you going to do?
Look for it.
You're going to look for a stream. You're going to get on your hands and on your knees, and you're going to take. Let's say you don't even have a cup or anything. It's just you, right? You're lost in the woods, whatever. Yeah. You're going to take your cupped hands. You're going to. I don't know about you. I'm guessing that every time I cup my hands and bring them to the mouth, I'm just making my shirt wet, and I've got a few drops of water in my mouth, and most of it's going down the front of my shirt. It's not a very effective way to drink. I believe that when we were really living in nature, full time in nature, no clothes, no houses, just us in nature like other species,
right?
We were probably getting the vast majority of our water from our food, our fruit, which is how I get it now. I mean, the crazy thing is, in the 14 years we've been measuring hydration, we measured more than 5,000 people's hydration levels. No one's ever come close to being as hydrated as I am. Well, a couple people have come close.
And what percentage are you?
Around 78%.
Okay.
Where I believe we should be around 80%.
Okay.
So somewhere in that range. Okay. Now here's the crazy thing. In the average week, I mean, at least prior to me spending 8 hours a day talking every day, I probably, on an average week, I probably drink between 1 and 2 liters a week.
That's not very much, yeah.
The average person that I work with, we find needs to drink between 3 and 4 liters a day.
Yeah, exactly.
So anywhere between 20 and 30 liters a week, and I'm drinking 1 or 2. They're eating 15 to 30 times more water. And I'm better hydrated than they are.
Yeah.
Well, as I said earlier, it's because we get the garbage out of the body. That's sitting there like a giant sponge.
Yeah. That's why you can't go by a chart of what you should eat and drink.
No. Yeah, there's no way to calculate based on you're 150 pounds. That means you need to drink 75. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. Not at all.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, we can get to the point where we don't really need to drink much water. Some, but not very much, because we're getting most of it from our perfect food if we're eating high water content food.
Yeah, exactly.
That's entirely
don't
possible.
Jump ahead of the schedule.
That's right. So coming back to the point, we are meant to get our thirst and hunger needs met at the same time. And that's why the thirst and hunger mechanism are very similar. They're so similar, there was a study done on people who had insomnia. And they ran an ad, they asked for people with insomnia who wanted to participate in the study. They sorted for those people who were eating before they went to bed because they felt hungry before they went to bed. So they took these people in, and what they had them do was not eat, no matter how hungry they felt, but drink a glass of water instead.
Yeah.
And guess what? People were confusing thirst for hunger.
Yeah, yeah. Remember that guy, the Middle Eastern guy, what was his name? It started with a B. His book was like, "You're not sick, you're thirsty."
No, it was called Your Body's Many Cries for Water.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'll never forget him because, again, one of my heroes growing up was Batman.
Bob Mangelich or something like that.
Batman Mangelich, yeah. Everyone called him Dr. Batman because people couldn't pronounce his name.
Yeah. He didn't look very healthy, and he was really hooked on salt and cooked food and stuff. But
he wasn't very healthy. What he did was he found a way to deal with the symptoms of dehydration.
Drink a lot.
Well, and use salt, because what the salt does is it forces the body to store water extracellularly, but osmotic pressure is then going to force some of the water into the cells. So he was reducing symptoms and having people feel better, but he died at 72.
Yeah.
He was never healthy, and he died prematurely. And, again, evidence, he was an MD. MDs learn how to suppress symptoms, period.
It's harder for them to think normally or rationally.
It is, because they've only learned one way to do it. But, his book actually had a significant impact on me, because I realized from reading his book that he was right, that dehydration was a huge problem. It's just that I asked a question that doctors are never trained to ask, and that is, why are people dehydrated? What's the cause of this problem? He never asked that question.
No, that doesn't even exist in the training.
Exactly.
But just because somebody misses parts of the picture doesn't mean they didn't get parts that are really good.
No, exactly. I mean, it was his book was really it was a seminal thing for me reading that book, and I'm really glad he wrote it. It was a shame, unfortunately. He went to the National Institutes of Health probably 20 times and said, look, dehydration is a key piece here. They would pay no attention to him.
They're busy funding biowarfare and stuff like that. So
exactly.
They were about to get to it.
Exactly. That's right.
Well, this is a 10-minute piece, so we're probably near the end here after 40 minutes. But
I would guess
it's really fun pleasure to get to talk to you. And
it's my pleasure.
hopefully we get to do it a lot more.
I'd be happy to do it whenever you'd like. Just let me know.